We continue this catechism about the sacrament of confession, and actually the confession itself. And confession means to confess our sin, to say our sin, to tell them to an authorized priest for the purpose of obtaining forgiveness. We have to remember our sin, we have to be sorry for them, we need to have the will of stopping, and we have now to confess them to a priest in confession, and a priest who has the capacity to absolve you, because somehow not every priest has the capacity to give the sacrament of confession. He has to be approved by his bishop or by his ordinary, his superiors, to be able to give the sacrament. A confession should be humble, sincere, and entire. Humble, because we confess with the conviction that we are guilty and we are sorry for that. Sometimes people could be tempted to excuse themselves, to go for confession, to say they are not so guilty because, you understand, my husband, my grandmother, my mother-in-law, everybody is bad, and now, and we are not going in confession for excusing ourselves. We go for confession to accuse ourselves because we actually feel guilty and we accuse our own sins, not the sins of someone else, not the sins of our neighbors, but our own. And we go with humility because actually we feel that we are really guilty. When is our confession sincere? Our confession is sincere when we tell our sins honestly and frankly. We just tell our sins as they are. We don't exaggerate, we don't excuse them too much, we just confess as they are. The Catechism is saying if someone is confessing that he's told because his companions told him to, or that the tension was too strong, he's excusing himself. Let us just take responsibility for what we have done and accuse it. We should confess exactly as if we were telling our sins to God Himself, because God knows actually perfectly what we have done. There is no need of cheating God, and we cannot cheat God. This is why when we confess, let us confess. Actually, God is listening, He knows. Maybe we can cheat the priest, but we can never cheat God Himself. And to cheat the priests we just make the confession invalid. If you manage to hide a sin in confession, a mortal sin, the confession is invalid. Because the priest is unable to judge properly, it makes his judgment invalid because he doesn't know what he has to know. It means the absolution is invalid. We cannot cheat God, even if we can cheat the priest. And we should confess all the circumstances. A circumstance is what makes this sin to be maybe different. Yeah, if you say, okay, I have stolen something valuable. Yeah. That is just a mortal sin of stealing. But you omit to say that you have stolen maybe the ciborium full of host and you have sold it to the Freemasonry for sacrilege. Of course, it's a very different sin now. You have to say the circumstance, okay? To whom you sold it, okay? Because it's a very different sin now. And this sin actually only the Pope can forgive you. You have to write in Rome, because the priest cannot forgive you this sin of sacrilege on the Holy Eucharist. So this is a circumstance. You say, oh, you have stolen something valuable. Yes, it's very valuable, I agree. But you have to say that it's a sacrilege also, because it is a ciborium, consecrated ciborium. Yeah. The circumstance that are changing the sin. Even between fornication and adultery, it's not the same, because in adultery there is a contract and you are also breaking a contract. It's also a sin against justice. Or you say, I have beaten someone badly, okay. But this someone is maybe your parish priest, because you are not happy of something. It's also a sacrilege, because it's a consecrated person. Our confession must be clear, so that the confessor may not waste his time asking us questions. And we should also be very careful not to mention by name anyone in confession. Because sometimes people can go for confession and still they gossip in the confessional box. Because, it's not the place to gossip. There is no place to gossip actually, but not this one, okay? Because even the priest should not know some names, okay? If you have done something wrong with someone, we don't need the name of the person, okay? Because this is a gossip now, okay? And it's not because you are in confession that you are allowed to spoil the reputation of someone, okay? Even in confession. Now, be very careful not to mention the name. Of course, you can, if it's not affecting the reputation of someone and you need to mention a name, you can. But you cannot affect the reputation of someone, even in confession. And our confession must be clear, so that the confessor may not waste his time asking us questions. And sometimes, we don't like to ask questions. Mainly on certain topics that are difficult enough for the penitent. We don't want to torture people. We don't want to extract one by one everything we need to to know. It's better you say it. And the main problem is the number of times. You just have to say it yourself, okay? Father, I have missed Mass on Sundays. How many times? We should not even ask how many times, okay? It should come from the penitent. Father, I have missed Mass 3 times, and it was my fault, my pure fault, by laziness. That is clear, okay? You have the sin, the number of time, and the gravity of the sin is clear because you say it was my pure fault out of laziness. Because sometimes can come and confess, say, Father, I have missed Mass last Sunday. Okay, objectively to miss Mass is a mortal sin. But now you ask, did you have a good reason? Yes, Father, I had really to take care of, everybody was sick at home, I had to stay there. But I also prayed my whole rosary. Yeah, okay, but there is no sin now, okay? Because actually, you have just done your duty. Congratulations. Don't confess for a good action, okay? Because you have just done your duty to take care of people sick at home. And you have even prayed the whole day. There is nothing wrong there, okay? It's a good action. But it's good when you come, you say, okay, I have missed Mass last Sunday. Maybe you want to confess because you're not comfortable. And you say, Father, but I have really tried to pray. And I was traveling. I had no Mass. Okay. But now there is no sin. But at least you have given all the information to the priest. I have missed Mass last Sunday. I was traveling. I had no Mass. But I have tried to pray my best. Okay. There is no sin actually, but maybe you have cleared your conscience with the fact of missing Mass. But you were not obliged to accuse, but at least you have given all the information that the priest know exactly what has happened. But if you just say, oh, I have missed Mass last Sunday, just if you hear that like that, it's a mortal sin. If you confess it, it's because it's a sin, and it's a mortal sin. But after you discover that it was a good action actually, not a sin, because it was an act of charity, or because you had no choice, or because even you prayed even more than you should. So you understand why it is important to confess clearly the sin, the circumstances. Yes, I missed Mass, but I was traveling very far for my job. I could not attend Mass. That is a circumstance that explains why. Yeah. And the number of time is also something that has to be confessed, because we have to confess every single mortal sin. And if we have committed 10 times, we have to say 10 times, because it's 10 different mortal sins. And it's not really enough to say many times, because many times is starting by 2, ending at 1 billion, okay? And we don't know what is many times, okay? Or several times. Or maybe several times is less than many times, I don't know, but it's still not clear enough, okay? It's better you say, okay, maybe 10 or 20 times, I don't know, but at least we have between 10 and 20 times. Okay. But many times is not helping much. Several times is not really helping. I try to give the number of times, because this is what you are a frequency. Okay. My last confession was 10 years ago. I think I have been missing Mass on Sundays maybe 3-4 times every year. Okay. It's okay. It's good. We have an idea. Or the opposite. I think for the last 10 years, I never go to Mass, or maybe 1 or 2 times. Yeah, okay. We understand. Something have to be clarified. you cannot just try to hide, or people can try to say the minimum, hoping that the priest will not really understand what they have done. We are not confessing for that. We are confessing because we want to be forgiven, and for that we need to confess clearly. You can confess to the priest you want. You're not obliged to confess to this priest who knows you so well. You can confess to whoever you want. But you have to confess sincerely, and not to try to hide some details of some circumstance. And you can have this problem with even homosexuality. Okay, I've done something, a bad action with someone. Okay, the priest is thinking that it's with the other gender. Okay, because normally, yeah. But you say with someone, and you don't say more than that. But it's not the same sin at all. A sin against nature is not just a sin of fornication. It has a different gravity, and the sin is not actually properly confessed. Actually, you have hidden the sin in confession if you do that, because you have managed to say something, but not what was disturbing really you. And the confession is not valid. It's not valid, because actually there is a lack of sincerity in the accusation. And the priest cannot always ask this kind of questions. It's quite embarrassing, you know. You don't want to embarrass people with this kind of questions. But it's you to confess genuinely. Of course, if the priest is guessing that there is a problem, he will have to ask questions. Yeah, of course. In confession, we are to tell our own sins, not those of other people. It's not a place to gossip about the fault of others. There is a story that the Catechism is given of a woman who went to confession and complained bitterly of the faults of her son. And in giving the penance, the priest said, okay, say 2 Hail Mary for your sins and 10 rosaries for those sins of your son, which you have confessed. Okay, because he was trying to teach her a needed lesson. You are confessing your own sins, not the one of your son. Okay. We don't need to have more stories, okay? We just need the sin. And when you try to explain everything, of course, you want to be understood, but sometimes it's to be understood that the priest can understand why you have done it. And that is a kind of excuse, okay? If you have some excuse, God knows. And if someone has really, really disturbed you so much and you have been impatient, just come for confession and say, I have been impatient. Don't explain how much someone has disturbed you, because that is not helping anyone actually, okay? Just say, I have been impatient. Of course, for the confession, we need to know just the fact. Of course, if you need an advice, now maybe you need to explain more, because you want to be helped. And now, even the priest will ask you, okay, what is happening? And now you can develop, or you yourself, you can say, Father, I need an advice. Let me explain you my problem. That is fine. But for every sin, we don't need the whole story. Why you ended up slapping your mother-in-law. You can just say, I have slapped my mother-in-law. That is a sin. Okay, we understand exactly. And maybe we guess why, but we don't need your explanations. Yeah. We have to confess at least all our mortal sins, telling their kind, the number of times, and the circumstances, changing their nature. Yeah, there is still this story that is famous. No farmers, I don't know how they are here, but they are smart in our country. And we have the story of this old farmer who came into confession. He was a bit nervous. And he said, Father, I have stolen a rope. And he stopped. The priest asked, you know these guys, how long was the rope? Maybe about 3 years long, Father. But you are still nervous. And the priest asked, and there is anything else you stole? And now he finally said, yes, a cow was attached to the rope. Yeah, he took the rope and he went, and the cow followed. I don't know why. Yeah, that is a way to confess and to hide. But of course, it's not valid. It's not valid. We need to know the exact nature or kind of the mortal sins we have committed. It's not enough for one to accuse himself of grievous lying. It means, I have lied in a serious matter. It's not really enough, because maybe you have other sins that can be involved. Because if the sin of lying is serious, it's because you damage unjustly something or someone. And now maybe there is also not also a sin of lying, but also not only a sin of lying, but also a sin against justice. That is the case with calumny. Calumny is a lie, but a lie that is affecting the reputation of someone else, and it's unjust, and you cannot be forgiven from an injustice if you don't restore the justice, if you don't pay back for what you have taken. And strictly a sin of calumny, you have to establish the truth and go back and say, I have lied, it was not what I said. You wanted to revenge against someone, you send an email to the boss and invented bad stories about this person to revenge. And this person is losing the job. You feel happy. But after you realize that that was a calumny, a serious sin because he has lost his job. Now what should I do? In justice, you have to compensate for the job he has lost. In justice, you should find for this person a new job. In justice, there is a damage in interest, you know. And you are the cause of a loss, you should pay for this loss. You can see the gravity. Can't just say, oh, Father, I have lied. It's not enough. Yes, you have lied and someone has lost his job unjustly. You have to pay for it. This is justice. You can see why the confession has to be entire, clear. Now, we have already spoken about how many times and some circumstances. Is it necessary to confess every sin? It's necessary to confess every mortal sin, which has not yet been confessed and forgiven. It is not necessary to confess our venial sin, but it is better to do so. We have already explained that for a mortal sin there is a process, and this process is confession. Of course, God can forgive this sin immediately with a perfect contrition, but we still have to go and submit this sin to the power of the keys. You know, remember, Jesus has given the keys of the kingdom of heaven to Saint Peter, and has given the power to open and to close. It's a symbolic power, but it's the power of the keys. He has not given physical keys. He has given a power of closing and opening, of forgiving or not. And this is why every mortal sin has to be submitted to the power of the keys that is delegated from Saint Peter and the apostles and the bishop to the priest. It is good to confess the venial sins because you receive more graces to fight, and sometimes the priest can also help you even for venial sins. But you receive more graces. It is a custom to end your confession by saying, I also accuse myself for the sins of my past life, those I could have forgiven. But it's good to check the formula you are using, because some formula have no meaning at all. Some people, they say, I am sorry for all the sins I have forgotten. Yes, but are you sorry for the one you have not forgotten? So sometimes some formula are not making sense. It's good to understand what we say. Number 3, the priest can refuse absolution when he thinks the penitent does not have the necessary dispositions. Or he may also postpone absolution if he thinks it best to do so. So sometimes people can promise in confession, and after maybe it's difficult to do it and they don't do it. Maybe it can be better, okay, do it, give back this money, and come back for your absolution. Okay. And now you know you have not received absolution, you have to go back, give the money, and come for your absolution. Sometimes it can be prudent to do so, and the priest can delay absolution. Give back first. This is why the priest is a judge in confession. He is a judge. It means he has to judge the contrition of the person. And if the person is sorry, whatever is the sin, we can forgive. Apart some special case. But the priest must judge about the disposition of the penitent. And also to judge about the purpose of amendment, if this person is really willing to stop or not. Yeah. What must a person do who has knowingly concealed a mortal sin in confession? He has to, first of all, to go and confess that he has done a bad confession. Because this is the sin he has committed, to a sacrilege. He has also to tell now the sin that he has hidden in confession. He has now to mention it. He has also to mention the sacraments he has received since that time. Because imagine that it was 10 years ago, you have done something very shameful, and you have never dared to say that in confession. But still you have gone for confession every week, but you never dare to say that. And you know you are guilty, you still go for confession because you hope to be forgiven without saying. Actually, you are just adding more mortal sins, but it doesn't work. But now the person comes after 10 years, Father, I have hidden this sin for 10 years. And the priest will ask, which sin? Because if you have hidden, now you have to say it, okay? Now, which sin? And now the person can say the sin. Okay, good. Now, have you received the sacrament of confession since? Yes, Father, every week. Okay, that means 3,650 sacrilege confession. 3,650 sacrileges, mortal sin, each one. Every invalid confession is a mortal sin. Okay? Have you received the Holy Eucharist? Yeah, every day. Okay. I am exaggerating the number of confessions, but the communion every day is 3,650. The confession, yeah. Okay. And even I received the sacrament of confirmation. Okay. And marriage. Yes, and marriage. Okay. All the sacrament, confirmation, and marriage is only once, but both of them, it's also a mortal sin or sacrilege. And it's not finished. He has also to confess all the mortal sins he has committed since these 10 years. because none of them have been forgiven by the confession, because they were all invalid. Basically, he has to do a general confession. Since the last good confession, general confession, and he has to accuse the sacrileges to receive sacraments with a mortal sin. Now this is what has to be done in case of someone who knowingly, if you remember something you never confess because you forgot, that is different. You don't need to redo all the confession. This sin is even forgiven. But still, sometimes it's good to do a general confession. Because a general confession during a retreat can clear maybe so many things you didn't know really, you are not so much aware, maybe you forgot, maybe you don't remember if you confess or not. Sometimes it's good to do a general confession, even at least a very good one from childhood. Because when you get mature, maybe you can remember things that you just forgot before. General confessions are precious, and I think every adult at a stage should do a very good general confession. When you become more aware of certain things. But mainly if you come back to sacraments after a few years, now it's good to go for a general confession.